Canadians deserve a real choice in the next election, and it has become obvious to me with the internal battles that I cannot be the one to carry the Liberal standard into the next election.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will step down as leader of the Liberal government. Trudeau said he will remain as Prime Minister until a new party leader is elected.
I am a fighter, and I am not someone who backs away from a fight, particularly when a fight is as important as this one is. But I have always been driven by my love for Canada, by my desire to serve Canadians, and by what is in the best interest of Canadians.
The resignation follows months of turmoil within the Liberal Party and a gridlocked House of Commons. It culminated with Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland's resignation in December. Freeland stated she had been at odds with Trudeau for weeks over the best path forward for Canada. When asked whether Freeland's resignation sparked his decision, Trudeau said he would not provide details.
Anyone who's been watching politics closely over the past months will know that Parliament has been entirely seized by obstruction and filibustering and a total lack of productivity.
Trudeau also asked Governor General Mary Simon to prorogue Parliament until March 24th. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, whose party is leading in the polls, responded through a video posted on social media.
They want to protect their pensions and paycheck by sweeping their hated leader under the rug months before an election to trick you and then do it all over again.
Trudeau said little about Indigenous people during his press conference, but he mentioned Liberal efforts has moved Canada forward on reconciliation. Mi'kmaq Liberal Member of Parliament Jaime Battiste says legislation affecting Indigenous people will halt with Parliament being suspended.
And there was nothing I would like to see more than to finish some of these pieces of legislation and see them get to royal assent. But with all three opposition parties saying that they're not willing to work with us, we're left in a position where these important pieces of legislation may die on the table.
However, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh said he would not work with a new leader. The NDP had been supporting the Liberal minority government up until this past December. Singh said he would use a non-confidence vote against the Liberals as early as possible to trigger an election.
New Democrats will be voting against this government for an election where Canadians will have a choice. The Liberals have let you down. They've let you down again and again. It doesn't matter who the leader is. The Liberals have let you down. They do not deserve another chance.
Assembly of First Nations National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepenak responded to Trudeau's resignation in a written statement, saying he has taken meaningful steps to address issues that matter to First Nations, including access to housing, clean water, education, the issue of child welfare, and the passing of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. Woodhouse-Nepenak says much more work remains, but Trudeau's actions have provided a foundation for future governments to build upon. Savannah Craig, APTN National News, Montreal.
In his 29 years as president of the Manitoba Métis Federation, David Chartrand has met with many prime ministers. But when it came to supporting Red River Métis, Chartrand says Justin Trudeau exceeded the rest.
The reconciliation strategy is good for Canada, it's good for Indigenous people, and it's good for the future. So without doubt, I think Trudeau has proven that through the reconciliation model.
On Monday, Trudeau resigned from his post as Prime Minister of Canada. In a Tuesday interview with APTN, Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, Acting Grand Chief Betsy Kennedy, commended Trudeau for his commitments to reconciliation.
He had done so much for the contribution to First Nations, establishing the missing and murdered women file and the call to justice.
At the same time, she says the Trudeau government failed to deliver on some priorities for First Nations, including outstanding land claims.
Especially our treaty and our treaty lands. We've been trying to do that for over 20 years, and that still has not been done. And the infrastructure, especially our water. Many of our First Nations are still under water advisory.
Chartrand says advancing self-government for the Red River Métis and supporting the MMF's first-time home purchase program are among Trudeau's major achievements, as the torch is passed on to a new Liberal leader and potentially a new Prime Minister. Kennedy and Chartrand hope Canada's next leader stays committed to change.
I hope that reconciliation is still in the forefront, no matter what party is in play. I think it's proven itself that it is very successful. It's changed, as I said, tens of thousands of people's lives, Indigenous people, and that it shows that if you include the Indigenous people in the beginning, that there's less controversy, there's less fighting, there's less court cases that need to go on.
For now, Parliament has been prorogued until March 24th, and Trudeau will remain the leader of the federal Liberal Party until a replacement is chosen. Sierra Buttons, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Hundreds of supporters gathered in Edmonton to hear Carney's official declaration of his intention to become the next Prime Minister. He says his priority will be improving the economy. He says he believes that even with a large lead by the Conservatives in the polls, the Liberals can win the next general election that's supposed to happen on or before October 20th. Carney took swings at federal leader Pierre Poilievre and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith.
In these times, sending Pierre Poilievre to negotiate with Donald Trump is the worst possible idea. I can think of one other politician I might not send. It just came to me in the last 24 hours.
The first Indigenous candidate to run for the leadership of the Liberal Party of Canada is ending their campaign. Mi'kmaq Member of Parliament Jaime Battiste made history just last week when he announced his leadership bid. If he had won, he would have become the first Indigenous Prime Minister of Canada. Late this afternoon, Battiste released a statement saying he believed the best way forward to advance reconciliation, protect the environment, and to address the wealth gap is to endorse Mark Carney. Under the Liberal leadership contest rules, a non-refundable payment of $50,000 was due today. There are now 5 candidates still in the leadership race, including frontrunners Carney and Chrystia Freeland.
Mark Carney announced if he became the next Prime Minister, he would cancel the carbon tax. But Indigenous peoples or reconciliation has not been a big topic on the Liberal campaign trail until now. Carney said his own approach towards reconciliation includes fixing child welfare, building houses, and green energy.
So much of that will happen in partnership with First Nations. So the economic reconciliation aspect, really putting not just words into action, but into projects consistent with UNDRIP and our responsibility.
Nova Scotia Liberal MPs were at the event to support Carney, including Jaime Battiste, who dropped out of the Liberal leadership race on Thursday. Battiste made history as the first Indigenous person to run for the leadership.
Over the past 48 hours, I had several conversations with Mark, and I asked him questions around the environment. I asked him questions about reconciliation, and it became clear to me that he was the leader that Canada needed right now.
An important issue in the Atlantic region is the moderate livelihood fishery. Recently, all 13 chiefs in Nova Scotia rejected an offer from the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans to be part of a $250 million program for all 36 nations across the Atlantic region. The chiefs said their treaties are not for sale and say negotiations are nation to nation, not with DFO officials. APTN News asked Carney if he would support First Nations managing their own fisheries. Carney said,
absolutely, we have a responsibility as government. My government will certainly fulfill our constitutional responsibilities and respect those rights. We want to have a viable fishery that works for First Nations, works for all residents and fishers in Atlantic Canada.
Carney says his climate policy will ensure economic stability and lower costs for families. Angel Moore, APTN, National News, Jabuktuk, also called Halifax.
The former governor of the Bank of Canada won the race with a whopping 85.9% of votes cast. At a leadership convention in Ottawa on Sunday, former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland finished second with 8% in her first ballot, and former Liberal House Leader Karina Gould was third with 3.2%. Outgoing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien also gave speeches. Carney did not mention Indigenous people in his speech, instead focusing on U.S. President Donald Trump and Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre.
Donald Trump thinks he can weaken us with his plan to divide and conquer. Pierre Poilievre's plan will leave us divided and ready to be conquered. Because a person who worships at the altar of Donald Trump will kneel before him, not stand up to him.
In a Friday virtual press conference, the NDP dug up an old court application made by the Mississauga First Nation against Brookfield Renewable Energy over the impacts of 4 hydroelectric dams on the Mississauga River, about 134 kilometers southeast of Sault Ste. Marie.
While Carney was pretending to work on making the world a more sustainable place as vice chair of environmental social governance at Brookfield, the reality was very different. Under Carney's environmental leadership, Brookfield trampled on First Nations rights and fought them in court every step of the way.
Laura Mayer is councillor with the Mississauga First Nation. She's also the NDP candidate for Sault Ste. Marie-Algoma. Mayer criticized the Liberals for shrinking the size of cabinet and vowing to move faster on pipeline projects.
Is the growing trend of downgrading Indigenous issues, folding ministries, cutting funding, or promising to fast-track development without free, prior, and informed consent. We've seen governments say they're focused on what matters most to Canadians, while completely ignoring how that work's done by creating effective and responsive partnerships with Indigenous communities.
Ontario Superior Court documents show Mississauga First Nation brought a court application against Brookfield Renewable Energy and the Ontario government in June 2022, alleging they had violated the First Nations Section 35 rights regarding permits to take water at the hydroelectric dams. A judge dismissed the application, but this did not stop NDP MP Nikki Ashton from continuing to hammer away at Carney's environmental record well with Brookfield Asset Management.
This is a company funding initiatives impacting the traditional lands of Indigenous peoples and the environment. Turns out Carney's definition of investing in green energy includes violating Indigenous water rights and steamrolling First Nations.
APTN News reached out to the Prime Minister's office for comment, but did not hear back by press time. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
On day 3 of the federal election campaign, Prime Minister Mark Carney stopped in Halifax at the Irving Shipyard, where he promised more investment in Canada's military. Hundreds of Irving Shipyard employees and Nova Scotia Liberal candidates stood behind the Prime Minister as he promised to rebuild, reinvest, and rearm the military. This includes increased surveillance capabilities of the Canadian Coast Guard to protect Canada's sovereignty. APTN News asked Carney if he would support Indigenous sovereignty because 3 Mi'kmaq First Nations announced last week that they are sovereign nations. And community members will assert their inherent rights to fish without federal authorization.
We will lay all that out. What I support is dialogue which balances Aboriginal rights, the realities of the fishery that works towards a sustainable fishery here in Nova Scotia, throughout Atlantic Canada, across this country.
On day 10 of the 2025 campaign, Liberal leader Mark Carney made a stop in Winnipeg, home to the largest urban Indigenous population in the country. However, his itinerary did not include a policy announcement for Indigenous peoples or public meetings with them. While taking questions, Carney was asked what that signaled about his party's stance on reconciliation.
On the day that I was sworn in, acknowledged the fundamental role of First Nations, Inuit and Métis peoples to the founding of our country. Within
2.5 days, I was in Iqaluit with the Premier and meeting First Nations. The Innu people, and the Métis. Within the first week, I met with all the leaders of the Indigenous organizations. Within the first week, we announced as a government the doubling and the broadening of the Indigenous loan program.
Carney has spoken extensively about speeding up mineral extraction and energy projects during his campaign. APTN asked how he plans to affirm First Nations' right to consultation and accommodation.
And when I speak of projects of national interest, when I speak of, for example, critical mineral extraction, which is a tremendous opportunity for this country, but can only proceed if there is free, prior, and informed consent. Only proceed, in my judgment, if there's full participation from First Nations groups.
APTN has requested an interview with Carney on multiple occasions throughout his Liberal leadership and 2025 federal election campaign. He has never been made available. Sierra Bettins, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Carney held a press conference that was heavy on tariffs and the economy, and he warned Canadians that economic times will be tough and that the Canadian economy will have to fundamentally change. That Canada needs to go its own way because the United States is no longer a reliable trade partner.
We will need to do things previously thought impossible at speeds we haven't seen in generations. Breaking down internal trade barriers so that we can have one Canadian economy, not 13. Making Canada more productive and competitive. Building things in this country again. Millions more homes. Building clean and conventional energy. Building more public transport, more mines, more assembly lines.
Last week, CBC News reported that during a 1965 interview, Principal Robert Carney talked about a program at an Indian day school in Fort Smith, Northwest Territories, where he explained the definition for, quote, culturally retarded children to the host. He said that term is for a student from a Native background who, for various reasons, has not been in regular attendance in school and has a non-English speaking background and is behind in their studies. Mark Carney said Indian day schools are a long and painful part of Canada's history and that residential schools cause fundamental damage and that he and his party want to advance truth and reconciliation. APTN News attempted numerous times to reach Carney and the Liberal Party for comment, but a statement was not provided. Robert Carney died in 2009.
I love my father, but I don't share those views, to be absolutely clear. It's a long, painful part of our history.
The Assembly of First Nations set up the forum. It was the last in a series that previously included the Green, NDP, and Conservative leaders. Mark Carney reiterated many previous Liberal commitments to Indigenous people that are also in his platform, such as implementing all calls to action in the TRC and MMIWG final reports. He also committed to moving forward on a new long-term agreement in child welfare reform that would include First Nations in all regions of Canada and continue ongoing funding for Jordan's Principle.
The commitment to begin that very important work, absolutely. Part of, I'll refer back to previous answers on Jordan's Principle and commitment of capacity of the government to move quickly on this. Of course, in getting those agreements, all sides must come to the table in good faith and achieve it. But yes.
Previous Liberal government only moved forward on child welfare agreement with Ontario after failing to reach a national agreement at AFN Special Chiefs meeting last year. In general, Carney said under his leadership he would continue to work in partnership with First Nations, but he would move more quickly and strategically to achieve results.
A commitment to the fundamental rights of First Nations and a commitment to the recognition of those fundamental rights and an upholding and defense of those fundamental rights. But related to that, a commitment to practical, high-impact solutions that realize those rights, whether it's of children, whether it's to clean drinking
water, whether it's to fully sharing in initiatives for economic prosperity.
Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Supporters were out in full force at the Liberal Party rally in Winnipeg last night. Hundreds were jam-packed into the standing room-only downtown location to hear Liberal Party leader Mark Carney share his last thoughts with the crowd in the final days of the election campaign. He emphasized creating free trade across the provinces and territories, saying we should have one economy, not 13.
If we are elected, we will do our part. We will put in place legislation by July 1st to eliminate all federal barriers. Free trade in Canada by Canada Day.
Many involved U.S. President Trump and Canadian Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre.
We can't change President Trump. No. So we need a leader who can stand up to him. That leader is not Pierre Poilievre, who draws his inspiration from President Trump, who copies his idea, whose first instinct when our nation was attacked was to call Canada stupid. Shame.
Carney also mentioned his plans to support Indigenous peoples and reconciliation, a topic that has received little attention by the main party leaders throughout the election.
My government is committed to working in real partnership with Indigenous peoples. That means upholding the principle of free, prior, and informed consent. It means practical steps like doubling the Indigenous Loan Guarantee Program to $10 billion. That makes it easier for Indigenous communities not just to be part of projects, but to build long-term wealth by being owners of major resource projects.
Outside of the rally, Pimicikamak Cree Nation Chief David Monias says Carney is the only leader he believes could fight against Trump's threats against Canada. He was also happy to hear Indigenous issues being mentioned.
I've been looking forward to see what he has to say about Indigenous people. I got to hear it today. I haven't heard it from the other people that I went to their rallies and I've seen their rallies, but this one I was really impressed by what he had to say.
Rally goer Glorian Chartrand said it was refreshing and encouraging to hear Carney's platform.
I think exactly what it is that we need as Indigenous people going forward, to be partners and drivers of the economy in the future. I think we're in very, very good hands with Carney.
She says Indigenous voters need to keep this in mind.
The most important thing is to get out and vote. We can make a real difference as Indigenous people if our voices are heard. And in our mainstream community in Canada, the best way to do that is to go out and vote, and those numbers matter. So just take that 10 minutes and make sure that you go cast your vote.
The last day to vote is Monday, April 28th, Election Day. Sav Jonesa, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Mark Carney wasted no time speaking with reporters. He said Canadians made their voices heard with the highest voter turnout seen in the last 30 years, and that Canadians have given him a mandate to make big changes quickly. He said that will require teamwork.
As I stressed on election night, I am committed to working with others, governing as a team in cabinet and caucus, and working constructively across parties in Parliament. Working in real partnership with provinces, territories, and Indigenous peoples.
Economy, trade, and security are some of his top priorities.
In the coming weeks, I will unveil more of our plans to engage with Canadians as we embark on the biggest transformation of our economy since the end of the Second World War.
He said an immediate priority is to meet with the U.S. President Donald Trump on Tuesday.
Our focus will be on both immediate trade pressures and the broader future economic and security relationship between our two sovereign nations. My government will fight to get the best deal for Canada. We will take all the time necessary, but not more, in order to do so.
Border security will also be strengthened with dog teams, drones, and 1,000 more border security officers to fight the traffic of guns and drugs.
We'll strengthen Canadian law enforcement by hiring 1,000 more RCMP officers and giving law enforcement more tools to fight crime. We will toughen the criminal code and bail laws for those threatening the safety of Canadians
including making bail harder to get for those charged with stealing cars, with home invasion, human trafficking, and smuggling.
A new cabinet will be sworn in on May 12th, and Parliament will resume May 26th. According to Carney, King Charles will travel to Canada later this month when he will deliver the throne speech on May 27th. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Ottawa.
The new cabinet contains a number of new faces. This includes Northern Quebec MP Mandy Galmasti, who takes over at Indigenous Services Canada. Galmasti is the former head of the Grand Council of the Crees and the first Indigenous person to oversee ISC. Northern Manitoba MP Rebecca Chartrand has been appointed to Northern Affairs. Chartrand identifies as Anishinaabe, Innu, Dakota, and Métis. Northern Saskatchewan MP Buckley Boulanger, who is Métis, is the Secretary of State for Rural Development. In a press conference at Rideau Hall after announcing the new cabinet, Carney said his team will govern for all, regardless of who Canadians cast a ballot for in the recent election.
So whether you voted for this government or not, we are in your service, in the service of building a stronger, more united Canada. We will build and we will govern for all Canadians. Build big, build bold, build now.
In another press conference on Parliament Hill, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre said the new Prime Minister may be trying to project an image of change, but his cabinet contains many faces who served with former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, including new Justice Minister Sean Fraser.
Sean Fraser was the immigration minister who caused the immigration crisis, the housing minister who gave us the housing crisis, and now he's the minister responsible for addressing the Liberal crime crisis. It seems like he is the master at failing upward.
Northwest Territories MP Rebecca Alty is the new Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations. Her predecessor, Gary Anasandagri, moves from that portfolio to public safety, and Patty Haidu goes from ISC to Jobs and Families. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.